Good evening, fellow travelers through time. I'm your guide through the shadows of history, and tonight we embark on a journey that will take us deep into the forgotten corners of medieval life, where the ordinary becomes extraordinary, and the mundane reveals the profound truths of human existence. Tonight, we explore the lives of those who walked the darkened streets when others slept safely in their beds. We delve into the world of the medieval night watchmen, those solitary figures who stood between civilization and chaos, between order and the unknown dangers that lurked in the darkness of medieval towns and cities. Picture, if you will, the year 1347. The Black Death has not yet reached its terrible peak, but whispers of plague drift like smoke across the European continent. In the town of Canterbury, England, as the cathedral bells toll midnight, a lone figure emerges from a small wooden shelter, adjusting his woolen cloak against the autumn chill. His name is William de Ashby, and for the next 8 hours he will be the sole guardian of his assigned quarter of the town. This is not a tale of grand battles or royal intrigues. This is the story of the countless men who, night after night, walked the silent streets, carried flickering lanterns through narrow alleyways, and listened to the subtle sounds that distinguished normal nocturnal activity from potential danger. These were the night watchmen of medieval Europe, and their stories have been largely forgotten by history. But tonight we remember them. We will walk with them through the darkened streets of London, Paris, Florence, and a dozen other medieval cities. We will understand their duties, their fears, their small triumphs, and their daily struggles. We will explore how they lived, how they died, and how they shaped the very foundations of law enforcement and community protection that we know today. So settle in, dear listeners, as we embark on this extended journey through the medieval night. Let the gentle rhythm of our exploration carry you through the hours as we uncover the hidden history of those who watched over our ancestors while they slept. To understand the medieval night watchman, we must first journey back to the very roots of organized society itself. The concept of communal protection during the vulnerable hours of darkness stretches back to the earliest human settlements, when our ancestors first gathered in groups larger than family units, when they first built permanent dwellings and established the rudimentary foundations of what we might call towns. The need for nighttime vigilance became apparent. In ancient Rome, the vigiles urbanae served as both firefighters and night watchmen, patrolling the streets of the eternal city with torches and buckets of water. These men, drawn primarily from the freed slave class, understood that darkness brought unique dangers. Fire was perhaps the greatest threat in a city built largely of wood and cloth, but robbery, assault, and various forms of civil unrest also flourished under the cover of night. As the Roman Empire crumbled and gave way to the fragmented kingdoms of early medieval Europe, many of these organized systems of protection collapsed with it. The early medieval period, roughly from the 5th to the 10th centuries,
saw a return to more primitive forms of community protection. Villages and small towns relied heavily on communal responsibility and the ancient Saxon concept of frank pledge, where groups of men were collectively responsible for the behavior and protection of their members. But as trade began to flourish again in the 10th and 11th centuries, as towns grew larger and more prosperous, the old systems proved inadequate. Merchants traveling with valuable goods needed protection. Craftsmen with shops full of precious materials required security. The growing urban populations of medieval Europe demanded more sophisticated forms of law enforcement. It was in this context that the formal institution of the night watch began to emerge. The earliest recorded instances of organized night watches in medieval England date to the reign of Edward I, around 1285, with the Statute of Winchester. This crucial piece of legislation mandated that every town maintain a watch from sunset to sunrising, with watchmen appointed by local authorities and given specific powers and responsibilities. The statute declared that in every city and borough, watch shall be kept every night from the time of sunsetting unto sunrising. It specified that the watch should consist of at least 12 men in larger towns, with proportionally fewer in smaller communities. These men were to be good and able-bodied citizens, equipped with appropriate weapons, and given the authority to arrest suspicious persons and investigate disturbances. But the Statute of Winchester was not created in a vacuum. Similar systems were already developing across continental Europe. In France, the guet, or night watch, had been established in Paris as early as 1254 under Louis IX. These watchmen, known as guetteurs, patrolled specific districts of the city, working in coordination with the Prévôt de Paris and his sergeants to maintain order during the night hours. In the Italian city-states, particularly in Florence and Venice, elaborate systems of night patrol had developed by the 13th century. The Florentine birrovieri combined the roles of night watchman and public crier, walking designated routes through the city while calling out the hours and weather conditions. Venice, with its unique geography of canals and bridges, developed specialized night patrols that moved both on foot through the narrow calle and by boat through the waterways. The German states saw the emergence of the Nachtwachter by the 14th century, men who combined the traditional duties of watchmen with the role of town crier. These figures became deeply embedded in Germanic culture. Their calls of "Hört ihr Leut" and "Let yourselves be told," meaning "Hear, you people, and let yourselves be told," became as much a part of the urban soundscape as the church bells that marked the canonical hours. What's particularly fascinating about the development of medieval night watches is how they reflected the unique character and needs of each community. Coastal towns developed watches that focused heavily on preventing smuggling and monitoring ship traffic. Mining towns created specialized patrols to protect valuable ore shipments and prevent theft from mine sites. Agricultural market towns organized their watches around market days, when the influx of traders and visitors created both opportunity and risk. The selection of watchmen varied significantly from place to place, but certain patterns emerge from the historical record. In many English towns, the position rotated amongst the householders of each ward or district. Every male citizen of adequate means and physical capacity was expected to serve his turn as a watchman, typically for a period of 1 month per year. This system, known as watch and ward, created a sense of shared civic responsibility while ensuring that the burden of night patrol was distributed among the community. But not everyone was suited to or willing to perform these duties. The records from medieval London show that many citizens preferred to pay a fine rather than serve their required time as watchmen. This led to the gradual emergence of professional watchmen, men who made their living by taking on the night watch duties of others in exchange for payment.
As the sun set over the medieval city, a transformation began that few modern people can truly comprehend. The bustling streets that had been filled with merchants hawking their wares, craftsmen at their trades, and citizens going about their daily business gradually emptied as people retreated to the safety of their homes. The wooden shutters closed, the shop doors were barred, and the only illumination came from the occasional flicker of candlelight seeping through cracks in window coverings. Into this transformed world stepped the night watchman, beginning a routine that would continue largely unchanged for centuries. Let us follow William de Ashby, our Canterbury watchman from 1347, through a typical night of duty, understanding through his experience the daily reality of medieval night watching. William's shift began at sunset, which in autumn meant approximately 6 o'clock in the evening. He would report to the watch station, typically a small wooden structure or stone building that served as the gathering point for the night's patrol. Here, the day watch would provide him with a briefing on any unusual activities, suspicious individuals who had been observed during the day, or specific concerns that required attention during the night hours. The watch station also served as an armory of sorts, housing the communal equipment used by the watchmen. William would collect his lantern, ensuring it was filled with oil and equipped with a fresh wick. He would check his weapon, typically a bill or halberd provided by the town authorities, making sure the blade was sharp and the handle secure. His personal effects were minimal but essential: a heavy woolen cloak for warmth, a leather pouch containing a small amount of food for the long night ahead, and a horn for summoning assistance. The first hour of William's shift involved what we might call reconnaissance. He would walk the entire circuit of his assigned district, taking note of which buildings showed signs of occupancy, which seemed unusually quiet, and which doors or windows appeared to have been tampered with since his last patrol. This initial survey was crucial, as it established the baseline against which he would measure any changes throughout the night. Medieval towns were laid out in patterns that reflected centuries of organic growth rather than planned development. Streets were narrow and winding, often following the contours of the land or the boundaries of ancient property holdings. Buildings crowded close together, their upper stories often projecting out over the streets, creating dark passages and hidden alcoves where potential troublemakers could hide. William had to know every one of these potential hiding places, every shortcut through the maze of streets, every building that offered legitimate late-night activity versus those that should be completely quiet. The watchman's route was not random, but followed a carefully planned circuit designed to cover the entire district while allowing for regular returns to key points. Major intersections, market squares, and important buildings like churches or guild halls received more frequent attention than residential side streets. The timing of the circuit was crucial as well. A good watchman could complete his full route in approximately 2 hours, allowing for 3 complete patrols in an 8-hour shift. But William's duties extended far beyond simple patrolling. Medieval communities operated on the principle of collective responsibility, and the watchman served as the community's representative in maintaining order and reporting problems. If he discovered a door left open on a shop, he was responsible for securing it and determining whether anything had been stolen. If he found evidence of a break-in, he needed to investigate the scene, determine the extent of the damage, and track down the shop owner to report the incident. One of the most challenging aspects of a watchman's duties was dealing with individuals who were legitimately abroad during the night hours. Medieval society was not as rigidly regulated as we might imagine, and there were many reasons why a person might be walking the streets after dark. Physicians might be called to attend to emergency cases. Clergy often moved between religious houses for midnight services. Merchants arriving late from distant markets might be seeking lodging. Craftsmen working on urgent projects might need to purchase materials or deliver finished goods. The watchman had to develop the ability to quickly assess whether a person's presence in the streets was legitimate or suspicious. This required not only knowledge of the community and its residents, but also skill in reading human behavior and motivation. A person walking purposefully towards a known destination, carrying tools of trade or other evidence of legitimate business, would be treated differently than someone loitering without apparent reason or attempting to avoid contact with the watchman. When a watchman encountered someone during his patrol, the interaction followed established protocols that balanced the need for security with respect for legitimate activity. He would approach openly, carrying his lantern so that both parties could see each other clearly. The greeting was typically formal, but not threatening. "Good evening, friend. What business brings you abroad at this hour?" The response would determine how the encounter proceeded. A satisfactory explanation, "I'm Thomas the baker's apprentice, carrying word to Master John that his mother has taken ill," would typically result in a brief conversation and perhaps an offer of escort to ensure safe passage. An unsatisfactory or suspicious response would lead to further questioning and possibly detention until morning, when the person's identity and purpose could be verified by daylight witnesses. The watchman's authority in these encounters was considerable, but not absolute. He could detain suspicious individuals, confiscate weapons, and even make arrests in cases of obvious criminal activity. However, he was also constrained by community expectations and legal procedures that required evidence and proper testimony for serious accusations. A watchman who developed a reputation for harassment or excessive force would quickly find himself removed from his position. Fire prevention and response represented another crucial aspect of the watchman's duties. Medieval cities were tinderboxes with closely packed wooden buildings, open flames used for heating and lighting, and primitive chimney systems that frequently caused house fires. The watchman was often the first person to detect smoke or flames, and his quick response could mean the difference between a minor incident and a devastating conflagration that consumed entire neighborhoods. William carried not only his lantern and weapon, but also a small leather bucket for water and a long hook for pulling burning thatch from roofs. When he detected signs of fire, his first responsibility was to raise the alarm by blowing his horn in the distinctive pattern that signaled fire emergency. He would then attempt to contain the blaze if possible, or at least prevent its spread to neighboring buildings while waiting for other citizens to respond to his call for help. The night hours also brought their own unique challenges in terms of weather and seasonal conditions. Winter nights in medieval England could be brutally cold, with temperatures below freezing and icy conditions that made walking treacherous. Watchmen learned to move carefully on frost-covered cobblestones and to recognize the signs of hypothermia in themselves and others. Summer brought different challenges, including thunderstorms that could extinguish lanterns and create dangerous conditions for anyone caught in the open. Rain was perhaps the most common weather-related challenge faced by medieval watchmen. The narrow streets of medieval towns often became streams during heavy downpours, with water cascading from the overhanging upper stories of buildings and creating muddy, slippery conditions underfoot. Watchmen learned to identify the buildings and doorways that offered the best shelter during storms, while still maintaining their vigilance for suspicious activity. The social dynamics of night watching were complex and varied according to the specific community and circumstances. In smaller towns where everyone knew each other, the watchman often served as much as a friendly guardian as a law enforcement officer. He might check on elderly residents who lived alone, carry messages between households during the night hours, or provide assistance to travelers seeking lodging. In larger cities, the relationship was more formal and potentially more adversarial, particularly in districts where crime was common and tensions between different social groups ran high. William's interactions with different social classes required careful navigation of medieval society's rigid hierarchies. A merchant or guild master encountered during night hours within the seemingly simple structure of medieval night watches lay a complex web of social relationships, hierarchies, and power dynamics that reflected the broader patterns of medieval society. The organization of night watch services was never uniform across medieval Europe, varying not only from country to country, but from town to town, shaped by local customs, legal traditions, and the specific needs of each community. At the apex of the watch hierarchy stood the watch captain, or constable, a position that carried significant responsibility and modest prestige within the community. In England, this role was often filled by the constable, an office that traced its origins back to the Norman conquest. The constable served as the link between the night watch and the broader system of royal justice, responsible for ensuring that local law enforcement operated within the framework of royal law and municipal regulations. The constable was typically selected from among the more prosperous citizens of the community, merchants, successful craftsmen, or minor landowners who possessed both the social standing and financial resources necessary to fulfill the position's requirements. This was not merely a matter of social snobbery. The constable was often expected to use his own resources to supplement the community's funding for watch operations, purchasing equipment, providing additional compensation for watchmen during emergencies, or covering the costs of pursuing criminals beyond the town's boundaries. In larger cities like London or Paris, the watch system developed more elaborate hierarchical structures that reflected the complexity of urban administration. The city might be divided into multiple wards or districts, each with its own watch captain, responsible for coordinating patrol activities within his assigned area. These ward captains reported to a chief constable or prévôt, who oversaw the entire city's night security operations and served as the primary liaison with royal or municipal authorities. The selection process for watch captains varied according to local customs and legal frameworks. In some communities, the position was elective, chosen by the watchmen themselves or by the citizens of the ward. In others, it was an appointed office, filled by municipal authorities or royal officials. Some positions rotated annually among qualified citizens, while others were held for longer terms by individuals who demonstrated particular competence in the role. Below the captains in the hierarchy came the regular watchmen, but even this apparently uniform group was stratified into various ranks and specializations. Senior watchmen, men with years of experience and proven reliability, often received better assignments, higher pay, and additional responsibilities. They might be tasked with training new recruits, investigating more complex incidents, or serving as the primary contact with other law enforcement authorities. The most experienced watchmen often developed specializations that reflected both their personal skills and the specific needs of their communities. Some became expert trackers, capable of following thieves or other criminals through the maze of medieval streets and into the surrounding countryside. Others developed expertise in detecting and investigating fires, becoming the community's primary fire prevention specialists. Still others became skilled in dealing with the various types of people who might be encountered during night patrols: merchants, pilgrims, suspicious strangers, or known troublemakers. New watchmen, whether volunteers fulfilling their civic duty or men seeking to earn money through professional watch service, typically underwent a period of apprenticeship under the guidance of experienced veterans. This training period was crucial, as the work required not only physical courage and stamina, but also detailed knowledge of local laws, customs, and procedures. A new watchman needed to learn to distinguish between legitimate and suspicious behavior, to navigate the complex social hierarchies of medieval society, and to exercise authority appropriately without causing unnecessary conflict or resentment. The relationship between volunteer and professional watchmen created another layer of complexity within the watch hierarchy. In theory, the civic duty of night watch service applied equally to all qualified citizens, creating a democratic system where merchants and craftsmen served alongside laborers and servants. In practice, however, the system was heavily influenced by wealth and social status. Prosperous citizens could often avoid personal service by paying fines or hiring substitutes, leading to the emergence of professional watchmen who made their living by fulfilling the night watch obligations of others. These professional watchmen occupied an ambiguous position in medieval society. They performed essential services for the community, but they were often drawn from the lower social classes and viewed with some suspicion by their social superiors. The payment system for night watch service reflected these social distinctions. Volunteers fulfilling their civic duty typically received no direct compensation, though they might be excused from other municipal obligations or given preferential treatment in business matters. Professional watchmen received modest wages that varied according to their experience, the difficulty of their assignments, and the resources available to the community. In prosperous commercial towns, professional watchmen might earn relatively good wages that allowed them to support their families and maintain respectable positions in the community. In poor rural areas or during times of economic hardship, watch service might provide only subsistence-level income that needed to be supplemented with other work. This economic disparity affected both the quality of watch services and the social standing of the men who provided them.
The equipment and uniforms provided to watchmen also reflected their position in the social hierarchy. Senior watchmen and constables often received better weapons, more reliable lanterns, and distinctive clothing that marked their authority and helped citizens identify them during emergencies. Regular watchmen might be provided with basic equipment or expected to supply their own gear, leading to variations in effectiveness and appearance that reinforced social distinctions within the watch. Seasonal variations in watch organization created additional complexities in the social structure of medieval night watches. During winter months, when nights were long and cold, communities might reduce the number of active watchmen or rotate duties more frequently to prevent exhaustion and frostbite. Summer brought different challenges, including an increase in criminal activity as traveling merchants and seasonal workers swelled the population of market towns and trading centers. Harvest time created particular demands on watch services, as the concentration of valuable grain and other agricultural products in town markets attracted thieves and created opportunities for various forms of fraud and theft. Many communities organized special harvest watches that involved additional personnel and extended hours of patrol. These seasonal watches were often staffed by volunteers from the agricultural community, who had specific knowledge of farming practices and could more easily identify suspicious activity related to grain theft or livestock rustling. The relationship between night watchmen and other authority figures in medieval society was complex and sometimes contentious. Parish priests, responsible for the moral welfare of their communities, sometimes viewed watchmen as potential allies in maintaining moral order, but also as competitors for authority over nighttime activities. The Church's emphasis on moral purity and regulation of sexual behavior sometimes conflicted with the watchman's more practical approach to maintaining civil order. Guild masters and commercial leaders had their own interests in night security, particularly regarding the protection of workshops, warehouses, and market areas. They might lobby for increased watch services in commercial districts while showing less concern for residential areas where working-class families lived. This tension between commercial and residential priorities created ongoing challenges for watch captains trying to allocate limited resources fairly